Back to the Stephen A. Smith Show. Before I get on out of here, Caitlin Clark.
$1 billion. Let that number sit in your mind for a second. $1 billion. That's not a typo. That's not clickbait. That's the figure now being whispered in boardrooms from New York to Riyadh. And at the center of this seismic shift in women's sports, a 22-year-old from Iowa who just changed everything. But here's what nobody is talking about yet. This isn't just about Caitlin Clark getting paid. This is about the complete and total destruction of the WNBA as we know it. And the wildest part? The league did this to themselves. Stephen A. Smith, the most polarizing voice in sports media, just went on air and said something that should have every WNBA executive losing sleep tonight. He didn't hint. He didn't speculate. He looked directly into the camera and confirmed what insiders have been whispering for months. The deal is real. The money is Saudi. And Caitlin Clark's exit strategy is officially on the table. Now pause. Take a breath. Because what you're about to hear isn't just sports news. This is a story about jealousy, about betrayal, about a league that had the golden ticket handed to them on a silver platter and chose to spit on it instead. Think about this for a moment. Caitlin Clark single-handedly turned women's college basketball into must-see television. She shattered viewership records. She filled arenas that had never seen a crowd that size. She made people who had never watched a single women's game suddenly care. And how did the WNBA reward her? $76,000. That's her base salary. $76,000. The mascot, yes, the guy in the fuzzy costume shooting t-shirts into the crowd, for the Denver Nuggets makes nearly 8 times that amount. Let that sink in deep. The most marketable female athlete on earth. The woman responsible for millions in ticket sales, jersey revenue, and TV ratings. And she's being paid less than a mid-level corporate accountant in most American cities. But here's where it gets darker. It wasn't just the money that pushed her to the edge. It was the treatment, the whispers, the dirty plays, the hip checks that had nothing to do with basketball and everything to do with sending a message. You don't belong here. That's what the league told her. Not with words, but with actions. And someone overseas was watching very, very closely. When Stephen A. Smith started raising the alarm, people laughed. They called him dramatic. They said he was stirring the pot for ratings. Nobody's laughing now. Because what he revealed in his latest broadcast isn't speculation anymore. It's a blueprint. A blueprint that the Saudi Public Investment Fund has used before and is about to use again. Remember LIV Golf? Of course you do. They didn't ask the PGA for permission. They didn't negotiate. They simply wrote checks so massive that legacy, tradition, and loyalty became irrelevant. Phil Mickelson took the money. Dustin Johnson took the money. And the PGA watched helplessly as their foundation cracked. Stephen A. sees the same play happening here. And this time, the target isn't aging golfers looking for one last payday. It's the biggest name in women's sports. And she's listening. Here's the thing about billion-dollar deals. They don't happen overnight. They're calculated. They're strategic. And most importantly, they wait for the perfect moment of weakness. The Saudi investors didn't just wake up one morning and decide to throw money at women's basketball. No, they've been watching, studying, waiting for the exact moment when frustration met opportunity. And the WNBA handed them that moment on a silver platter. Let's rewind for a second. Because to understand why Caitlin Clark would even consider walking away from the league she dreamed of playing in, you need to understand what she's been walking into since day one. The 2024 WNBA draft was supposed to be a coronation. The number 1 overall pick. The player who broke Pistol Pete Maravich's all-time scoring record. The woman who made the NCAA tournament the most watched event in women's sports history. This was her moment. But watch the footage from that night. Look at the faces in the crowd. Listen to the energy in the room. Something was off. There was applause, sure. But underneath it? Attention you could cut with a knife. Veteran players shifting in their seats. Side glances exchanged between established stars. It wasn't celebration. It was resentment. And that resentment followed her onto the court. From her very first game in the WNBA, Caitlin Clark became a target. Not because of what she did wrong, but because of what she represented. She was proof that the league had been undervaluing itself. She was evidence that with the right star, women's basketball could command real money, real attention, real respect. And that made certain people very uncomfortable. The fouls started immediately. Hard screens that were more like tackles. Elbows thrown under the basket with surgical precision. Hip checks on inbound plays that had nothing to do with defense. Remember the Chindi Carter incident? If you haven't seen it, go watch it right now. Pause this video if you have to. Carter walked up to Clark on an inbounds play, the ball wasn't even in motion, and delivered a blindside hip check that sent Clark stumbling. No basketball play. No strategic purpose. Just a message delivered with brute force. We're coming for you. And what did the league do? They called it a common foul. A slap on the wrist. A nothing burger that told every player in the league that open season on Caitlin Clark was officially sanctioned. Stephen A. Smith lost his mind on air. And honestly, he should have. Because this wasn't just about one play. This was about a pattern. A coordinated effort to humble the one player who could have elevated everyone's salary, everyone's visibility, everyone's legacy. But instead of protecting their investment, the WNBA chose ego over economics. And somewhere in the Middle East, a group of investors smiled. Because they knew something the WNBA apparently didn't. When you mistreat generational talent, eventually that talent looks for the exit door. And when that door opens to $1 billion offer, you better believe she's going to at least peek through. What Stephen A. said next on his show sent shockwaves through the sports world. And it confirmed what many had feared. The conversation wasn't hypothetical anymore. It had already begun. Stephen A. Smith doesn't mince words. Love him or hate him, the man has spent decades cultivating sources that most sports journalists would sell their souls for. When he speaks, teams listen. When he drops a bombshell, executives panic. And what he dropped last week, that wasn't just a bombshell. That was a nuclear detonation. The market for Caitlin Clark, he said, leaning into the camera with that signature intensity, is no longer domestic. We're talking about global players. We're talking about entities with unlimited resources. And I'm telling you right now, conversations are happening that the WNBA doesn't even know about yet. Unlimited resources. Let those words echo for a moment. The Saudi Public Investment Fund, the same group that reshaped professional golf overnight, manages over $700 billion in assets. That's not a typo. 700 billion. They bought Newcastle United in the Premier League. They're pumping money into Formula One. They transformed boxing into a spectacle that pays fighters more in one night than most athletes earn in a lifetime. And now they've set their sights on women's basketball. But why? Why would Saudi Arabia care about a sport that most of America still ignores during prime time? Because it was never about the sport. It's about influence. It's about image. It's about buying credibility on the world stage. Sports washing, that's what analysts call it. You take a controversial regime, you attach it to beloved athletes and prestigious events, and suddenly the conversation shifts. People stop talking about human rights. They start talking about three-pointers and championship runs. And who better to attach to your brand than the most famous female athlete on the planet? Caitlin Clark isn't just a basketball player. She's a phenomenon. She's a walking, breathing marketing empire. Her face sells jerseys. Her name trends worldwide. Her games draw ratings that rival men's professional sports. For the Saudis, she represents something money can't usually buy: authenticity, likability, American approval. And they're willing to pay whatever it takes to get it. Stephen A. broke down the economics in a way that made even skeptics pause. For the cost of one mid-tier NBA bench player, he said, a Saudi league could buy the entire WNBA All-Star roster, every single one of them, and still have change left over for a stadium. He's not exaggerating. The entire WNBA salary cap for a team is just over $1.4 million. The entire cap. For a whole team. Meanwhile, the Saudis paid Cristiano Ronaldo over $200 million per year just to play soccer in their league. Do the math. They could offer Caitlin Clark $50 million a year, a number that sounds absurd in women's basketball, and it would be pocket change for them. A rounding error in their sports investment portfolio. But here's what makes this truly terrifying for the WNBA. They're not just offering money. They're offering respect. They're offering infrastructure. They're offering the one thing Caitlin Clark has been denied since the moment she went pro: recognition of her worth. And according to Stephen A., she's finally ready to listen. But let's pause for a second and ask the question everyone's been dancing around. Would she actually do it? Would Caitlin Clark, the girl from Des Moines who grew up dreaming of playing in the WNBA, really walk away from the league she spent her entire life working toward? A year ago, the answer would have been an obvious no. But that was before the cheap shots. Before the jealousy. Before she watched the league she loved treat her like an inconvenience rather than a savior. Something changed in Caitlin Clark's eyes this season. Watch her early interviews from college. That wide smile. That infectious energy. The pure, unfiltered joy of a kid living her dream. She talked about the WNBA like it was Disneyland. Like getting drafted would be the happiest moment of her life. Now watch her recent press conferences. The smile is still there, but it's different. Practiced. guarded. There's a tiredness behind her eyes that wasn't there before. A wariness that comes from being hunted every single night on the court. She's learned to say the right things. I'm just focused on my team. I'm grateful for the opportunity. The physicality is part of the game. But actions speak louder than words. And the actions around her have been screaming a message she can no longer ignore. Her own teammates have been lukewarm at best. The league's biggest stars have either stayed silent or thrown subtle shade. The players' union, the very organization that should be championing her ability to drive revenue, has done nothing to protect her. Meanwhile, the attacks on the court continue. It's not basketball anymore. It's punishment. And Caitlin Clark is smart enough to know the difference. Stephen A. Smith picked up on this shift before anyone else. I've been watching her body language, he said during a recent segment. And I'm telling you, this is not the same kid who came into the league. She's exhausted. Not physically, mentally, emotionally. She's asking herself the question every great athlete eventually asks. Is this worth it? And that question is exactly what the Saudis are counting on. Because here's the thing about generational wealth. It changes the equation. When you're making $76,000 a year, you tolerate the disrespect. You put your head down. You grind. You tell yourself it's about the love of the game, about legacy, about proving the doubters wrong. But when someone puts $1 billion on the table, suddenly martyrdom doesn't seem so noble anymore. Suddenly all those hip checks and elbows and dirty plays have a price tag attached. And that price tag makes the WNBA look like a toxic relationship that's no longer worth saving. Stephen A. didn't just hint that conversations were happening. He revealed something far more explosive. He said there's a timeline, a deadline, a window of opportunity that's closing faster than anyone realizes. And what happens when that window closes? The WNBA loses everything. Let's talk about what $1 billion deal actually looks like. Because that number sounds almost fictional. Like something a Hollywood screenwriter made up for a sports movie. But when you break it down, when you see how the Saudis structure these offers, it becomes terrifyingly real. This isn't a single check for $1 billion. It's a kingdom. Based on what insiders have leaked about similar Saudi sports deals, here's what could be on the table for Caitlin Clark. First, the base salary. We're talking somewhere between $50 million and $75 million per year. That's not a projection. That's consistent with what they've offered to top-tier athletes in other sports. Cristiano Ronaldo, Neymar, Karim Benzema. The Saudis don't negotiate like normal franchises. They overwhelm. But the salary is just the beginning. Then comes the signing bonus. Reports suggest these can range from $100 million to $300 million, paid up front, in full, the moment ink hits paper. That's generational wealth before she even steps on the court. Then there's the housing. We're not talking about a nice apartment in Indianapolis. We're talking about a fully staffed villa, a compound, properties that would make NBA superstars jealous. Some athletes in Saudi leagues have been given literal palaces. Then the endorsements. Here's where it gets interesting. Part of these Saudi deals includes guaranteed sponsorship packages with companies connected to the kingdom. We're talking another $20 to $50 million per year in endorsement income, completely separate from the playing contract. Add it all up over a 5-year deal, you're looking at close to $1 billion, maybe more. Now compare that to what the WNBA is offering. $76,000 base salary. No private jets. Shared charter flights that the league only recently agreed to, and only because of the backlash from how they treated Clark. Commercial middle seats for most of her career. Hotels that wouldn't pass inspection in some European soccer leagues. The contrast isn't just stark, it's insulting. And Caitlin Clark knows it. But here's what makes this situation uniquely dangerous for the WNBA. It's not just about Clark anymore. If she leaves, if the biggest star in women's basketball walks away for Saudi money, she opens a door that can never be closed again. Every elite player will suddenly have leverage. Every negotiation will include the unspoken threat, pay me what I'm worth or I'll find someone who will. The entire economic model of women's basketball collapses overnight. Stephen A. Smith put it bluntly. This isn't just about losing one player. This is about losing the future. If Caitlin Clark goes to Saudi Arabia, she takes the entire momentum of women's sports with her. And the WNBA will spend the next decade trying to recover, if they recover at all. The league has one chance to stop this. One opportunity to prove they value their greatest asset. But so far, their response has been silence. A silence that speaks louder than any press release ever could. The silence from the WNBA isn't just disappointing, strategic. and not in a good way. See, there's a playbook that legacy organizations use when they're caught flat-footed, when they're embarrassed, when they realize they've made a catastrophic mistake but can't admit it publicly. They go quiet. They hope it blows over. They pray that the news cycle moves on before they have to take responsibility. But this situation isn't going anywhere, because Stephen A. Smith won't let it. Every single day he's back on air hammering the same points. The disrespect, the jealousy, the short-sighted greed that's pushing the league's biggest star toward the exit. He's turned this into a personal crusade, and millions of people are watching. "I've never seen anything like this in my career," he said during his most recent segment. A league actively sabotaging itself. A league watching its golden goose get beaten up every night and doing nothing. It's like they want her to leave. And maybe they do. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to say out loud. Not everyone in the WNBA wants Caitlin Clark to succeed. Her success exposes their failures. Her marketability highlights their invisibility. Her salary demands would force the league to restructure in ways that threaten established power dynamics. There are players, veterans who've been in the league for a decade, who resent the attention she gets, who feel like they paid their dues in empty arenas and poverty wages, only to watch a rookie become the face of the sport overnight. Is that jealousy? Absolutely. Is it understandable? Maybe. Is it smart? Absolutely not. Because here's what those veteran players don't seem to grasp. Caitlin Clark isn't taking anything from them. She's creating something for everyone. Her visibility raises the tide for the entire league. Her ratings attract sponsors. Her jerseys fund salaries. Her presence at the negotiating table gives every player more leverage. But instead of embracing that reality, the league has chosen civil war. And the casualties are mounting. Look at the TV ratings from this season. Games featuring Caitlin Clark draw 3 to 4 times the viewership of games without her. Advertisers are paying premiums for slots during her matchups. Merchandise sales have skyrocketed, but almost entirely for fever-related gear. The rest of the league is watching from the shadows, bitter and broke. And the Saudis are taking notes, because they understand something fundamental about human psychology. When someone feels undervalued, when they feel attacked, when they feel like the people who should support them have abandoned them, that's when they're most vulnerable. That's when the right offer at the right time becomes impossible to refuse. Stephen A. hinted that the Saudi representatives aren't just offering money. They're offering something far more seductive. They're offering Caitlin Clark the chance to be appreciated, to be celebrated, to never again have to justify her worth to people who refuse to see it. And for someone who spent the last year being hip-checked and humiliated, that offer might be worth more than $1 billion. Let's talk about what happens if she says yes. Not the business implications, not the league fallout. Let's talk about the moment itself. Imagine the press conference. Caitlin Clark walks up to a podium. Behind her, a backdrop featuring the logo of a brand new Saudi-backed women's basketball league. Cameras flash. Reporters jostle for position. The whole world is watching. She clears her throat, takes a breath, and speaks. "After careful consideration with my family and my team, I've decided to accept an opportunity that values my contributions appropriately. I want to thank my fans for their support. This was not an easy decision, but sometimes you have to bet on yourself." The room erupts. Within seconds, the clip goes viral. Twitter crashes. ESPN runs breaking news banners. Sports talk shows cancel their scheduled programming. The story dominates every platform, sports and otherwise, for days. And in that single moment, the WNBA's nightmare becomes reality. Because it's not just about losing Caitlin Clark. It's about what her departure symbolizes. It's a public admission that the league failed, that they had the most valuable player in women's sports history, and they couldn't figure out how to keep her. That jealousy, ego, and short-term thinking destroyed a decade of momentum. The sponsors notice first. Within hours of the announcement, phones start ringing at WNBA headquarters. Nervous brand managers asking questions. Is our partnership still viable? Should we reconsider our investment? What's the long-term outlook without Clark? Then the TV networks call. Those broadcasting deals that were supposed to be renegotiated next year? Suddenly the leverage is gone. Why would ESPN or NBC pay premium rates for a league that just lost its only mainstream draw? The numbers don't make sense anymore. Then the attendance drops. Not immediately, but within weeks, the empty seats become impossible to ignore. The Fever, Caitlin's former team, sees their sellout streak evaporate overnight. Other franchises, already struggling, watch their modest crowds shrink even further. Then the players feel it. Those same veterans who threw elbows and celebrated the hard fouls? They start seeing their endorsement deals dry up. Their social media engagement plummets. The brands that were circling, waiting to capitalize on the rising tide of women's basketball, they take their money elsewhere. Because Caitlin Clark didn't just leave. She took the spotlight with her. Stephen A. Smith painted this picture with devastating clarity. "You think Caitlin Clark needs the WNBA?" he asked rhetorically. "She doesn't. The WNBA needs her. And they're about to find out exactly how much." But here's the darkest part of this scenario. The part nobody wants to acknowledge. If Caitlin Clark succeeds in Saudi Arabia, if the league is well-run, well-funded, and well-promoted, other players will follow. Not just American players. International stars who've been underpaid for years. Elite athletes who've been waiting for someone to prove there's another path. The exodus won't be sudden. It'll be gradual. One star at a time. Each departure weakening the WNBA further. Until what's left isn't a league anymore. It's a memory. But wait. Before we write the WNBA's obituary, there's still a chance. A small one. A closing window. But a chance nonetheless. Stephen A. Smith, despite all his criticism, has been clear about one thing. He doesn't want Caitlin Clark to leave. He doesn't want women's basketball to collapse. Everything he's been saying, all the warnings, all the outrage, it's been a desperate attempt to wake the league up before it's too late. "I'm not rooting for the downfall," he said, his voice dropping to an unusually serious tone. "I'm trying to prevent it. But the people in charge need to understand, the clock is ticking. And right now they're running out of time." So what would it take to keep Caitlin Clark? Let's break it down. First, the obvious. Money. The WNBA salary cap needs a complete overhaul. Not incremental increases. Not symbolic gestures. A fundamental restructuring that reflects the revenue these players generate. If Caitlin Clark drives $50 million in ticket sales and merchandise, she should see a significant percentage of that value. Is the league profitable enough to support massive salaries? Maybe not yet. But that's where creative solutions come in. Revenue sharing. Performance bonuses. Equity stakes in the league itself. There are models that work. They just require imagination and willingness to change. Second, protection. The physical targeting has to stop. And not through strongly worded memos or token fines. The league needs to make it crystal clear that cheap shots will result in serious consequences. Suspensions. Lost wages. Public accountability. Right now, the message to players is simple. You can assault Caitlin Clark with minimal repercussions. That message needs to change overnight. Third, and this might be the hardest one, culture. The league needs to publicly, unequivocally embrace Caitlin Clark as what she is, the face of women's basketball. Not reluctantly. Not with caveats. Full-throated support from the commissioner, from the players' union, from the veteran stars who've been throwing shade. This means press conferences. This means social media campaigns. This means sitting down with the players who've been most hostile and having honest conversations about the future. Is any of this happening? As of right now, the answer is no. The WNBA has released carefully worded statements about player safety and ongoing discussions. Corporate speak that means nothing. Empty calories designed to pacify without committing to change. Meanwhile, the Saudi representatives aren't sending press releases. They're sending private jets. According to sources close to the negotiations, preliminary meetings have already taken place. Not formal contract discussions, not yet. But introductions, presentations, vision casting for what a Saudi-backed women's basketball league could look like. And those presentations are reportedly impressive. State-of-the-art training facilities, guaranteed media coverage across the Middle East and Europe, a promotional budget that dwarfs anything the WNBA could dream of. They're not just offering Caitlin Clark money, they're offering her a throne. Stephen A. put the choice in stark terms. She can stay in a league that treats her like a problem to be managed, or she can go somewhere that treats her like the queen she is. If you were 22 years old with your whole career ahead of you, which would you choose? The question hangs in the air, and the WNBA still hasn't answered it. There's one more element to this story that nobody is talking about. The fans. Not the casual viewers who tune in occasionally. Not the sports media personalities debating the drama. The real fans. The ones who've been supporting women's basketball for decades. The ones who bought tickets when arenas were half empty. The ones who watched games on obscure cable channels because they believed in the product. What happens to them? Because here's the uncomfortable reality. If Caitlin Clark leaves for Saudi Arabia, she's not just leaving the WNBA. She's leaving the fans who made her. The little girls who wear her jersey. The college students who camped out overnight for tickets to her games. The families who drove hours to watch her play. Those people don't have private jets to fly to Riyadh. They can't afford international streaming packages to watch games that air at 3 a.m. Eastern Time. They can't follow her career the way they follow it now, obsessively, joyfully as part of their daily lives. And Caitlin Clark knows this. It's the one thing that might be keeping her from signing that contract right now. Stephen A. Smith addressed this directly in one of his most emotional segments yet. "I've gotten messages," he said, his voice cracking slightly, "from young girls, from parents, asking me if Caitlin is really leaving, asking me to tell her to stay, and I don't know what to say to them. Because the truth is, she shouldn't have to choose between financial security and the people who love her. But that's exactly the choice the WNBA has forced, by undervaluing her, by allowing the attacks, by standing silently while jealousy consumed the locker room. They've created a situation where staying feels like martyrdom and leaving feels like survival. And the fans are caught in the middle. Some have already turned their anger toward the league. Social media is flooded with posts demanding change. Hashtags calling for the commissioner's resignation. Petitions circulating for salary cap reform. The frustration is boiling over in ways the WNBA has never experienced. But other fans have turned their anger toward Caitlin herself. How could she abandon us? They ask. How could she take blood money and play in Saudi Arabia after everything we've given her? It's an unfair question, but it's being asked. And it adds another layer of pressure to an already impossible situation. Because Caitlin Clark isn't just making a business decision. She's making a legacy decision. If she stays and the WNBA continues to mistreat her, she becomes a cautionary tale. The greatest talent who was never allowed to reach her potential. A symbol of what could have been. If she leaves and thrives in Saudi Arabia, she becomes a pioneer, but also a controversial figure. Someone who chose money over mission. Someone who abandoned the movement for personal gain. There's no clean option. No path without sacrifice. Stephen A. summarized the tragedy perfectly. This is a young woman who just wanted to play basketball, who loved the game more than anyone I've ever seen. And now she's being forced to make decisions that number 22-year-old should have to make. Decisions that will define her forever. The weight of that responsibility is enormous, and the clock is still ticking. So where does this end? That's the question everyone is asking. The question that Stephen A. Smith has been building toward. The question that will define the future of women's basketball, and perhaps women's sports entirely. Let me paint two possible futures. In the first future, the WNBA wakes up. They see the cliff they're racing toward and slam on the brakes. Emergency meetings are called. The commissioner makes a public statement acknowledging the failures. A new CBA is fast-tracked, one that properly compensates star players for their value. Security protocols are implemented to protect players from targeted violence. The culture shifts from jealousy to celebration. Caitlin Clark, seeing genuine change, decides to stay. She signs a restructured deal that makes her the highest-paid player in WNBA history. Not Saudi money, but enough to feel respected. Enough to feel valued. The league experiences a renaissance. Other stars follow Clark's lead. Sponsorships pour in. TV ratings climb. A new generation of young girls sees that women's basketball isn't just viable, it's aspirational. And 20 years from now, we look back at this moment as the turning point. The crisis that forced evolution. The near-death experience that saved the sport. That's the first future. But there's a second one. In the second future, the WNBA does nothing. They issue statements without substance. They promise reviews that never happen. They assume that Caitlin Clark needs them more than they need her. That she wouldn't really leave. That the Saudi threat is just negotiating leverage. And then one morning, the world wakes up to a headline that changes everything. Caitlin Clark signs historic $1 billion deal with Saudi Women's Basketball League. The shockwave is immediate. Within months, other stars follow. Breanna Stewart, Aya Wilson, Sabrina Ionescu. The WNBA's remaining talent pool drains like water through a sieve. Sponsors flee. TV contracts are renegotiated at a fraction of their previous value. Franchises fold. By 2030, the WNBA exists only in history books. A cautionary tale taught in sports management courses. A case study in how to destroy a league through arrogance and neglect. And Caitlin Clark? She becomes the most famous women's basketball player in history, but not for the reasons anyone imagined. She's remembered as the one who got away, the catalyst for collapse, the talent that exposed the system's failures. Two futures, one choice. Stephen A. Smith delivered his final verdict with characteristic bluntness. I've said everything I can say. I've screamed. I've begged. I've warned. Now it's up to the people with power to decide. Save the league or watch it burn. There is no middle ground anymore. He's right. The middle ground disappeared the moment Saudi money entered the conversation. The moment $1 billion became a real option. The moment Caitlin Clark realized she had leveraged the WNBA never anticipated. This story isn't over. In fact, it's just beginning. But one thing is certain. Whatever happens next, whether Caitlin Clark stays or goes, whether the WNBA survives or collapses, the sports world will never forget this moment. The moment when a 22-year-old girl from Iowa held the future of women's basketball in her hands. And the moment when everyone watched to see what she would do with it.